In the wake of the horrific attack on Charlie Hebdo, international media stood up in solidarity with the fundamental principle of free speech. And so did world leaders. More than 50 of them led a march in the streets of Paris to uphold the sacred value, chanting, "Charlie, Charlie," freedom of speech. Except this contingency only linked arms for the photo op. As you can see, the rest of the street is completely empty. You know, it wouldn't be so bad if this line of besties comprised of actual free speech warriors, but instead it was just a bunch of hypocrites, some of which are actually among the worst press offenders in the world. Following the incident, Reporters Without Borders stated, "We are appalled by the presence of leaders from countries where journalists and bloggers are systematically persecuted, such as Egypt, which is ranked 159th out of 180 countries in Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index, Russia, 148th, Turkey, 154th, and the UAE, 118th. But it wasn't just these countries' leaders laying bare their hypocrisy. France wasted no time to crack down on freedom of expression in its own country, starting with the arrest of French comedian Dieudonné. See, Dieudonné is a controversial as hell figure in France who regularly offends people with his anti-Semitism and for coining the reverse Nazi salute. And in the wake of the shooting, he took to Facebook and wrote, "Tonight, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like Charlie Koulibaly," referring, of course, to the perpetrator of the Paris supermarket killings. So apparently likening himself to the name of a killer was enough to get him thrown into a cell. And after several days of being detained, Dieudonné took to Facebook to say, "I feel like Charlie Koulibaly equals. For a year, I'm treated like the public enemy #1, while I only sought to make people laugh. I feel like Amity Koulibaly, while I'm no different from Charlie." Look, as much as you may disagree with Dieudonné's routine, he makes an excellent point here. How different is he from Charlie? Not so much. But this comedian has repeatedly gotten in trouble with the law for expressing ideas that are taboo in the Republic of Libertad. But even after Dieudonné was arrested for speech, there was no mainstream show of solidarity with his views. Why? Well, Glenn Greenwald makes the poignant point. That's because last week's celebration of the Hebdo cartoonists was at least as much about approval for their anti-Muslim messages as it was about the free speech rights that were invoked in their support. See, in the midst of a worldwide fight against Islamic extremism, the mockery of Muslims is expected and even encouraged as part of the necessary wave of demonization against the other. But the second that merely saying something unpopular and offensive about other groups becomes illegal, then we have a serious problem. This double standard hasn't fazed France, which hurried to invoke the Bush mantra, "The terrorists hate us for our freedoms," as an excuse to criminalize speech even more. At least 54 people have already been arrested by French police for, quote, defending or glorifying terrorism on social media. One 28-year-old mentally deficient man was already sentenced to 6 months in prison. The man was arrested after saying, "They killed Charlie. I have a good laugh. If I did not have a father or mother, I will train in Syria." According to the government, the effort is part of a crackdown on perceived hate speech to fight terrorism. Isn't it funny that world governments will use whatever they claim terrorists attacked their countries for in order to crack down on that very freedom? Look no farther than radical cleric and American citizen Anwar al-Awlaki, who gave sermons with language like this. "To the Muslims in America, I have this to say. How can your conscience allow you to live in peaceful coexistence with a nation that's responsible for the tyranny and crimes committed against your own brothers and sisters? How can you have your loyalty to a government that's leading the war against Islam and Muslims?" So, how different is what al-Awlaki said than, let's say, Fox News anchor Jeanine Pirro in her unhinged, psychotic rant calling to kill them all when referring to radical Muslims? Al-Awlaki was, of course, killed by a U.S. drone strike for his speech before being able to face his accusers in a court of law. Look, by all means, the world should be learning from the attack on Charlie Hebdo to double down on the most basic human right, the right to free speech and expression, no doubt. And it's very easy to stand behind the banner of free speech when it's something you agree with. But until even the most uncomfortable, vile, and offensive language is equally protected, the concept of free speech will forever remain a political tool and never a right.